My dad demanded I hand over my house keys to my pregnant stepsister, so I made sure they all got nothing. Sup, Reddit. My dad tried forcing me out of the house I bought with my own money for my train wreck stepsister, and what followed was the kind of family disaster that makes you question why DNA means anything at all. Buckle up, because this gets ugly. I'm Tyler, 31 years old, single, and finally at a point in life where things are actually going right. Spent the last decade grinding through entry-level positions, living in apartments where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor's phone vibrating, and saving every dollar like my life depended on it. Last year, I bought my first house. Nothing crazy, just a modest 3-bedroom with a small backyard and a garage that doesn't leak when it rains. But man, it felt like winning the championship. The place needed work when I bought it. Dated kitchen cabinets that were probably installed when cassette tapes were still a thing. Carpet that looked like it survived the Cold War and maybe a few apocalypses. And a bathroom that screamed 1987 with its pink fixtures and weird tile pattern. The inspection report was 6 pages of issues. Outdated electrical panel, water heater from the Bush administration, the first one, roof that had maybe 5 good years left if we were lucky, and plumbing that made concerning sounds when you flushed. But none of that scared me off. The bones were good, the foundation was solid, and the price was right specifically because of all those cosmetic issues. I saw potential where other buyers saw problems. Plus, having watched countless home renovation shows during my lunch breaks, I figured I could tackle most of the updates myself. Spent the first 3 months attacking projects every weekend, and most evenings after work. YouTube tutorials became my Bible. Watched a guy named Dave fix literally everything from leaky faucets to electrical outlets. Learned how to install subway tile backsplash without making it look like a drunk person did it. Figured out how to refinish hardwood floors using a rented sander and about 15 hours of backbreaking labor. Replaced every light fixture with modern ones from the home improvement store, swapping out those hideous brass monstrosities from the 90s. The kitchen was the biggest project. Spent $2,000 on new cabinets from a wholesale supplier, another $800 on countertops, and countless hours watching installation videos before finally feeling confident enough to tackle it. My buddy from work, Jake, came over one weekend to help me lift the countertops into place. Those things weighed about 1,000 pounds each, and we nearly dropped one, which would have been an expensive disaster. Bathroom renovation took another month of weekends. Ripped out the pink toilet and sink, installed normal white fixtures like a sane person, retiled the shower surround with neutral gray tile that wouldn't make future buyers wonder what decade they'd time-traveled to. The old bathtub was cast iron and weighed approximately the same as a small car, so that required recruiting Jake and 2 other guys to haul it out to the curb. Every improvement made it more mine, you know? Every fixed outlet, every painted wall, every project completed was proof that I'd built something real. First thing I ever owned that nobody could take credit for or claim they helped with. Nobody could say, well, we paid for that, or remember when I helped you with that? This was 100% my work, my money, my accomplishment. Unfortunately, having something good in your life attracts the wrong kind of attention when your family operates like a pack of vultures circling roadkill. Let's talk about my dad, Frank. He's 62 now, remarried, and has spent most of my existence either ignoring me completely or showing up just long enough to criticize my life choices. Classic part-time parent who thinks sending a birthday card every few years qualifies as quality parenting. The kind of guy who brags about his kids' accomplishments to strangers, but can't remember the last time he actually asked how I was doing. Frank works as a regional sales manager for an industrial equipment company. Decent job, makes probably $80,000 a year, spends most of it trying to maintain appearances, new car every 3 years, expensive golf club membership, fancy dinners at steakhouses where he can schmooze clients. The kind of guy who values image over substance, who thinks success is measured by what people see rather than what you actually accomplish. Growing up, I learned quickly that Frank's attention was transactional. If I brought home good grades, I might get a "that's my boy" at dinner. If I screwed up or needed something, suddenly he was too busy with work or too tired from his day. Emotional availability wasn't in his toolkit. He showed up for the highlight reel moments and disappeared for everything else. I remember being 12 years old, stuck at school for 3 hours after a teacher meeting that Frank forgot to attend. Sat in the principal's office while they called his cell repeatedly, each call going to voicemail. When he finally showed up at 6 p.m., his excuse was that he'd been on an important sales call and couldn't interrupt it. Didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge that I'd been waiting, just acted annoyed that my existence had disrupted his work schedule. That was pretty much the pattern my entire childhood. School plays where he'd show up late and leave early, Because work called. Baseball games where he'd spend the entire time on his phone, barely watching. The one time I made the honor roll and got an award at the school ceremony, he missed it entirely because of a mandatory golf outing with clients. Found out later that outing was completely optional. He'd just chosen golf over his kid's achievement. But he was different with Kayla. Completely different. Showed up to all her events, bragged about her constantly, treated her like she could do no wrong. The favoritism was so obvious even teachers at school noticed it during parent conferences. My mom died when I was 5. Car accident. Some idiot ran a red light and T-boned her at an intersection not even 2 miles from our house. She died instantly according to the police report I read years later when I was old enough to request it. The guy who hit her walked away with a broken arm and probably went home to dinner that night while I lost the only parent who actually gave a damn about me. The day it happened is burned into my memory like a brand. I remember sitting on the school curb waiting for her to pick me up, watching all the other kids leave with their parents. She was never late. My mom was the most punctual person I'd ever known, always early for everything. By 3:45, I knew something was wrong. By 4:15, the school secretary was making concerned phone calls. By 5:30, I was sitting in the principal's office eating a stale granola bar while teachers whispered in the hallway. Frank showed up at 6 p.m. looking annoyed, like I'd inconvenienced him by needing to be retrieved from school. Standing next to him was Linda. Yeah, that's right. Linda was already in the picture on the day my mom died. She was wearing this red blouse I remember vividly, standing there with her arms crossed while Frank barely acknowledged me. Found out years later they'd been seeing each other for 6 months before the accident. Real class act, my old man. My mom had known about the affair. Found her diary years later when cleaning out Frank's attic. She'd written about the suspicious phone calls, the late nights at work, the perfume smell that wasn't hers. She'd been planning to leave him, had already contacted a lawyer. The accident happened 3 days before her first consultation appointment. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if she'd had those extra 3 days. Linda became my stepmom about 2 months after Mom's funeral. 2 months. Didn't even wait for the flowers on the grave to die before he was remarrying. The ceremony was this small courthouse thing that I wasn't even invited to. They dropped me at my grandma's house for the afternoon and came back married. My grandma cried when she saw the wedding photos. Not because she was happy, but because she couldn't believe Frank would disrespect her daughter's memory like that. Linda's 58 now, but dresses like she's trying to relive her 20s. Botox appointments every 3 months that give her that slightly frozen look. Fake nails that could double as weapons and click annoyingly on every surface. Hair extensions that probably cost more than my first car. And a personality that could strip paint off walls. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately starts complaining about something. The temperature, the lighting, the furniture arrangement, whatever she can find to make herself the center of attention. She used to be a flight attendant back in the day, and she will never, ever let anyone forget it. Every conversation somehow circles back to her glory days serving drinks at 30,000 feet. When I flew internationally, or back in the golden age of aviation, or during my career with the airline, we get it, Linda. You wore a uniform and handed people tiny bags of pretzels while smiling through turbulence. Now she runs a home daycare out of their house, which is wild considering she barely managed to raise her own kid without completely screwing her up. Actually, scratch that. She did completely screw up Kayla. But we'll get to that. The daycare thing happened about 5 years ago when Frank's company downsized and he took a pay cut. Linda needed to contribute to the household income, but didn't want a real job, as she called it. So she got certified to run a home daycare. Watching her with other people's kids is something else. She's sweet and patient with them. Everything she never was with me. Guess it's easier to be nice when the kids go home at the end of the day. She charges $200 per week per kid and usually has 5 to 7 kids at a time. Does the math? She's pulling in decent money, more than you'd think. But somehow they're always broke, always struggling, always needing to borrow from relatives. Where does the money go? That's the million-dollar question nobody in the family wants to answer. That brings us to Kayla. She's 29, technically my stepsister, though calling her that feels generous since we're about as close as 2 strangers stuck in an elevator. She's Linda's daughter from a previous relationship. Some guy named Rick who bailed when Kayla was 2 and hasn't been heard from since. Linda won't talk about him except to occasionally mutter something about deadbeat fathers when she's had too much wine at family dinners. Frank has treated Kayla like his golden child since day one, like he was making up for her biological father's absence by going completely overboard in the opposite direction. The sun rises and sets on whatever Kayla does, no matter how questionable those choices might be. She could rob a bank, and Frank would find a way to spin it as entrepreneurial spirit. Kayla's career path has been unique. She works as an escort and runs an adult content page online. Look, I'm not here to judge anyone's life choices. Adults can do what they want with their own bodies and time. The problem is, she's terrible at it. Kayla is perpetually broke, which tells you everything you need to know about her business acumen in an industry where successful people apparently make decent money. I found out about her line of work in the most awkward way possible. My buddy Jake from work, the same guy who helped with the countertops, was scrolling through some site at a bar one night and nearly choked on his drink. Showed me his phone with this, "You're not going to believe this" look. There was Kayla's profile, complete with rates, services offered, and way more information than I ever wanted to know about my stepsister's professional life. "Dude, is this your sister?" he asked, looking uncomfortable. "Stepsister," I corrected, feeling my face go red. And yeah, that's her. The conversation that followed was excruciating. Turns out she'd contacted him weeks earlier through the site, not realizing we knew each other. When he'd messaged back saying he knew her brother, she'd blocked him immediately. Jake apologized for about 10 minutes straight, while I tried to scrub the mental images from my brain. The kicker is that Frank and Linda are completely oblivious, or at least they pretend to be. Frank thinks Kayla works in social media marketing, and Linda tells her daycare parents that Kayla is an online content creator, which is technically true but not in the way they think. Family dinners are hilarious when they ask about her work projects, and she has to come up with vague non-answers that don't reveal what she's actually doing. Despite all this, Frank calls her his pride and joy, and acts like she's running a Fortune 500 company instead of struggling to make rent every month. Meanwhile, I'm over here with a stable job, a house, and my life together, and I get treated like the family disappointment because I'm not married with 2.5 kids in a minivan by 31. Growing up in their house was like living as a background extra in someone else's movie. Kayla was the princess with the starring role, and I was the unwanted baggage that occasionally wandered through scenes. The double standards were everywhere, in everything, all the time. Christmas was the most obvious example. Kayla's pile of presents under the tree would be literally 3 feet high. Electronics, clothes, jewelry, whatever she'd asked for. Mine would be maybe 3 or 4 boxes of practical items I needed anyway. Socks, school supplies, a jacket that was more function than fashion. One year I got a graphing calculator for Christmas, while Kayla got a laptop, a new phone, and about $1,000 worth of clothes. "You need that calculator for school," Frank explained when I asked why the gift gap was so massive. "We're being practical." Practical. Right. Nothing says "we love you equally" like a calculator versus a laptop. Birthdays were the same story. Kayla's parties were huge productions with themes and decorations and dozens of her friends. Mine were usually forgotten until the last minute, then celebrated with a grocery store cake and a card signed by both parents. When I turned 10, they literally forgot my birthday entirely, realized 3 days later and tried to make it up with a quick trip to McDonald's. Kayla's 10th birthday 2 years earlier had been a full carnival-themed party with a rented bounce house, face painter, and magician. The favoritism extended to discipline, or lack thereof for Kayla. She could get away with literally anything, while I'd get grounded for the smallest infractions. She broke a window playing ball in the house? Accidents happen. I tracked mud on the carpet, grounded for a week, and lectures about responsibility. She failed 3 classes one semester, hired a tutor, I got a B instead of an A. Disappointed talks about not living up to my potential. By the time I was 8, Linda had made it crystal clear she didn't want me around anymore. The day she said it is permanently etched in my memory. We were all sitting at dinner. Spaghetti night, I remember, because I'd been excited about it all day. Linda put down her fork, looked at Frank, and said it like she was discussing the weather. "I'm not raising someone else's kid anymore. He needs to go somewhere else." Frank didn't even argue, just nodded like they'd already discussed it. I sat there with a mouthful of spaghetti, feeling my stomach drop, realizing I was the someone else's kid she was talking about. I was 8 years old, and my stepmother was announcing she was done pretending to tolerate me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice small. Linda looked at me with zero warmth. "You're old enough to understand. Your father and I need to focus on our family. You're not my responsibility." The fact that I was Frank's biological child, and therefore very much part of their family, apparently didn't factor into her logic. In Linda's world, family meant her and Kayla, and Frank was just the wallet that made their lifestyle possible. I was the unwanted reminder of his previous life, the inconvenient child she'd been stuck with when she married my dad. Spoiled, she called me later that week. The accusation was so absurd, It would have been funny if it wasn't coming from the woman who refused to parent me. I didn't even have my own bike because Frank forgot to get me one for 3 Christmases in a row. Kayla had 2 bikes, a scooter, rollerblades, and a bedroom that looked like a toy store exploded. But sure, I was the spoiled one. That's when they discovered the magic solution to their unwanted kid problem: boarding school. Frank framed it as providing me with a better education and more opportunities. But we all knew what it really was: a convenient way to dump me somewhere far away so they wouldn't have to deal with me. Linda could have her perfect little family without the constant reminder of Frank's first marriage. And Frank could pretend he was being a responsible parent by paying tuition. Boarding school wasn't terrible, actually. The structure was good for me, and at least there I wasn't constantly reminded that I was the unwanted one. Teachers there actually remembered my name and showed up to parent-teacher conferences, more than Frank ever did. I'd come home for holidays and summer breaks, but it always felt like visiting strangers who tolerated my presence out of obligation. The older I got, the more obvious the favoritism became. Kayla got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I got a bus pass and was told it would build character. She failed 2 classes senior year, and they hired a tutor. I made honor roll and got a text saying good job. When she dropped out of community college after 1 semester, they said she was finding herself. When I graduated with honors, Frank's response was, "Must be all that expensive boarding school we paid for." Every accomplishment I had was diminished. Every failure Kayla had was excused. The pattern was so consistent, it stopped hurting after a while. Just became the background noise of a dysfunctional family dynamic I couldn't wait to escape. I put myself through college working 2 jobs, graduated with a business degree, and landed a decent position at a supply chain management company. Worked my way up from coordinator to analyst to manager over 7 years. Lived in cramped apartments with questionable plumbing, skipped vacations, brown-bagged lunch every day, and saved like my life depended on it. Every dollar went toward the same goal: getting my own place where nobody could make me feel like I was taking up space I didn't deserve. Last year, that dream became reality when I closed on the house. 3 bedrooms, 1,800 square feet, nice quiet neighborhood where people actually maintained their lawns. The inspection revealed some issues: old water heater, outdated electrical panel, roof had maybe 5 years left, but nothing I couldn't handle or budget for. Got a fair price because of those issues, which worked in my favor. When I told Frank about buying the house, his response was peak Frank. "Oh, must be nice." Not congratulations, not "I'm proud of you," just barely concealed jealousy that I'd accomplished something without his help. Linda didn't even respond to my text about it. Kayla sent back a thumbs up emoji. Real supportive bunch. For a few months, I kept my distance from them. Why wouldn't I? They'd never been supportive, never showed genuine interest in my life, never treated me like actual family. But somewhere in my stupid, optimistic brain, I thought maybe this could be different. Maybe owning a house would earn me some respect. Maybe they'd finally see me as a successful adult instead of the inconvenient kid they'd shipped off to boarding school. So I did something dumb. I invited them to a housewarming party. Spent the whole week before cleaning, organizing, setting up. Hit the store for snacks and drinks, made sure the place looked perfect. Even bought nice paper plates because apparently I thought they deserved the good stuff. Looking back, I don't know what I was thinking. These people don't do normal family events. They do drama, and they do it at an Olympic level. They showed up an hour late naturally. Linda was first through the door, heels clicking on my newly refinished hardwood like she was making an entrance at some gala. She stopped in the entryway, scanned the living room with narrowed eyes, and her face twisted into that familiar look of disapproval. "Well, this is cozy," she said, drawing out the word like she was trying to find a polite way to say something insulting. Then added, "It's fine for someone single, I guess?" Frank wandered in behind her, hands in pockets, looking around with the enthusiasm of someone forced to attend a mandatory work training. "You didn't tell me you were looking at houses," he said. "You should have asked for my advice. I know a thing or two about real estate investments." Right. The guy who let Linda blow through their savings on her failed craft business ventures definitely had valuable financial wisdom to share. Kayla dragged herself in last, glued to her phone, muttering "nice place" without even looking up. I doubt she actually saw anything beyond her screen. The critiques started immediately. Linda zeroed in on my furniture choices. "Why such a dark couch? Makes the room feel heavy. You should have gone lighter, more inviting." Then, the curtains. "These are very basic. You need something with more personality." The kitchen. "This layout is inefficient. Who puts the microwave there?" Frank started questioning my financial decisions. "How much did you put down? What's your interest rate? You probably got screwed by the mortgage broker." He hadn't asked a single question about my life in 6 months. but suddenly he was a real estate expert. Kayla finally looked up from her phone long enough to ask, "How many bedrooms?" When I said 3, she and Linda exchanged this look. The kind of look that made my stomach drop because I knew something was coming. 3 bedrooms, Linda repeated slowly, like she was doing complex math. That's a lot of space for one person. Here we go, I thought. Frank jumped in. You know, Kayla's been having some housing issues lately. Nothing serious, just temporary problems with her current situation. Translation. Kayla got evicted again and needed somewhere to crash. She could really use a place to stay, Linda added, putting on her fake sweet voice. Just until she gets back on her feet. A month or 2 at most. I'd heard this song and dance before. A month or 2 in Linda speak meant indefinitely, until you physically forced them out. Besides, this was my house. The one thing I had that was completely mine, that I'd worked for, that nobody else could claim credit for. Sorry, but that's not going to work, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm not set up for roommates right now. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Linda's fake smile vanished. Frank's jaw tightened. Kayla actually looked up from her phone with genuine surprise, like the concept of someone saying no to her was completely foreign. Not set up for roommates? Linda repeated, her voice sharp. You have 3 bedrooms and you live alone. How are you not set up for it? I use the other rooms, I replied, which was true. One was my home office, the other was storage and my workout space. Besides, I'm not comfortable with the arrangement. Frank's face was turning red. She's your sister. Family helps family. Stepsister, I corrected. And family also respects boundaries. That went over about as well as expected. Linda launched into a speech about how selfish I was being, how Kayla was going through a difficult time, how I was being ungrateful after everything they'd done for me. That last part almost made me laugh. What exactly had they done for me, besides send me away and forget I existed? The housewarming party deteriorated from there. They stayed another 20 minutes, making increasingly passive-aggressive comments about my abundance of space and my lack of family values. Finally, they left in a huff, Linda making sure to loudly announce to Frank in the driveway that some people just don't understand what it means to be family. I closed the door behind them and stood in my living room, in my house, feeling relieved they were gone, but also weirdly guilty. That's the thing about manipulative family members. They're so good at making you feel bad for setting reasonable boundaries that you start questioning whether you're actually in the wrong. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. A few days later, I was at work when my phone started blowing up. Text after text from Linda, each one more demanding than the last. Started with, "We need to talk about Kayla's situation," and quickly escalated to, "You need to do the right thing here." And finally, "This is what family does for each other." I ignored them, had a big project deadline, and didn't have time for whatever drama they were cooking up. That evening, I came home to find Frank's car in my driveway. He was sitting on my porch like he owned the place, and his expression made it clear this wasn't a friendly visit. "We need to talk," he said, standing up as I approached. "About Kayla." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, unlocking my door. "I already said no." He followed me inside uninvited. "You don't understand the situation. Kayla's pregnant." That stopped me in my tracks. I turned to look at him, waiting for the punchline, but he was dead serious. "Pregnant," I repeated. 7 months, he said. "The father's not in the picture. She can't stay where she is now. The place isn't suitable for a baby. She needs somewhere stable, somewhere family can help her." The play was obvious. This was meant to be the emotional trump card that made me cave. Poor pregnant Kayla with nowhere to go, and her heartless stepbrother refusing to help. "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. "But it doesn't change my answer. This is my house and I'm not giving up my space for her." Frank's face went from serious to angry in about 2 seconds. "You're being selfish. We're talking about your nephew or niece here. That baby needs a stable home. Then you and Linda should provide one," I shot back. "You have a house. Let her stay there. Our place isn't big enough. We don't have the extra room now that Linda's running the daycare out of the spare bedroom. Your house is perfect. 3 bedrooms, quiet neighborhood, plenty of space for a baby." The absurdity of his logic was stunning. They'd kicked me out of their house at 8 years old, claiming there wasn't enough room. But now suddenly they expected me to house their golden child and her unplanned baby in the home I'd worked my tail off to buy. "You know what's funny?" I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "When I was 8 and you sent me to boarding school, Linda said she wasn't raising someone else's kid, said there wasn't enough space for me in your house. But now you want me to raise Kayla's kid? To give her space in my house? How does that make sense?" Frank's jaw clenched. "That was different. You were difficult to handle. Kayla's situation is temporary. I was 8 years old and grieving my mother. That's what you call difficult to handle? And Kayla's situation isn't temporary. She's having a baby. Babies are pretty permanent. You owe this family, Frank said, voice rising. After everything we've done for you, putting you through school, giving you a home when you needed it, giving me a home? I cut him off. Years of suppressed anger finally breaking through. You shipped me to boarding school at 8 years old because Linda didn't want to raise someone else's kid. You did the bare minimum required by law. I don't owe you anything. Frank's face was turning that particular shade of purple that meant he was losing control of the situation. He wasn't used to me pushing back, wasn't prepared for me to actually stand up for myself. All those years of me being the accommodating one, the one who took whatever they dished out, had made him think I'd always cave eventually. You're being unreasonable, he said, switching tactics to condescension. This isn't about the past. This is about helping your sister when she needs it most, when she's vulnerable and needs family support. Where was my family support? I asked. Where was it when I was working 2 jobs to get through college? Where was it when I was living in apartments with mold and broken heat? Where was it at my graduation that you skipped for a client meeting? He opened his mouth to respond, couldn't find words, closed it again. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. You need to leave, I said finally. My answer is no. It will stay no. And if you bring this up again, I'm cutting contact completely. The argument went in circles for another 10 minutes before I finally told him to leave. He did, but not before making it clear this conversation wasn't over. He was right about that. It definitely wasn't over. 2 days later, I got a call from Linda while I was in a meeting. Sent it to voicemail. She called again, and again. By the 4th call, I stepped out to answer. What? I said, not bothering to hide my irritation. Kayla's at the hospital, Linda said, her voice shaking with manufactured emotion. She's having complications. The stress of her housing situation is affecting the pregnancy. This is on you. The guilt trip was so obvious it was almost insulting. How is that on me? I'm not responsible for her life choices or her living situation. You could help, but you're choosing not to. You'd rather see your sister and her baby suffer than give up a little space in that big house you're so proud of. Linda, stop. This manipulation isn't going to work. Kayla's housing problems aren't my fault, and they're not my responsibility to fix. She's an adult who made adult decisions. Now she gets to deal with adult consequences. You're heartless, she spat. Absolutely heartless. I don't know how your mother would feel seeing what you've become. That crossed a line. Don't you dare bring my mother into this. You have no right to mention her after everything you've done. And you know what? I'm done with this conversation. Don't call me again. I hung up. She called back immediately. I blocked her number. Then she started calling from different numbers. Frank's phone, Kayla's phone, numbers I didn't recognize that turned out to be neighbors or friends. Each call was a variation of the same theme. I was selfish, heartless, abandoning family in their time of need. 20 minutes later, Frank called. I didn't answer. Then Kayla called from a number I didn't recognize. Probably a friend's phone. Didn't answer that either. The harassment continued for 3 more days straight. Texts at all hours. 6 a.m., 11 p.m., middle of my workday. Voicemails ranging from guilt-tripping, think about the baby who will suffer because of your selfishness, to outright hostile. You're going to regret this when karma catches up to you. Linda even tried showing up at my workplace, but security wouldn't let her pass the lobby. She spent 20 minutes in the lobby causing a scene before they threatened to call the police. My coworkers started asking questions. Everything okay? That lady at the front desk said she was your stepmom and needed to speak with you urgently. Having to explain that my family was harassing me about housing my pregnant stepsister was humiliating. Finally, I sent one group text to all of them. My answer is no. It will remain no. Stop contacting me about this, or I will file for a restraining order. The silence lasted about 12 hours before things escalated to a whole new level of crazy. I came home from work on a Thursday to find my front yard trashed. Not just messy, deliberately vandalized. Someone had dumped bags of garbage across the lawn, spray-painted selfish on my driveway in huge red letters, and smashed 3 of my front windows. Called the cops immediately. 2 officers showed up, took statements, looked at my newly installed security camera footage. Clear as day, there was Linda and Kayla at 2 a.m., going full destruction mode on my property. Linda was the one with the spray paint. Kayla, 7 months pregnant, mind you, was hurling rocks through my windows. You want to press charges? The officer asked, reviewing the footage on my laptop. Absolutely. The officer nodded. Based on this footage, we can charge them with criminal mischief, vandalism, and trespassing. The property damage looks substantial. There's more, I said, pulling up the texts and voicemails. They've been harassing me for weeks, trying to force me to let my stepsister move in. When I refused, this happened. The second officer scrolled through the messages, his expression getting more disapproving with each one. This is pretty clear harassment. With the property damage on top of it, you've got a solid case. They filed the report, and Linda and Kayla were arrested the next morning. Frank called me screaming about how I'd destroyed the family and demanding I drop the charges. I hung up on him. The cleanup cost me $3,200. New windows, professional driveway cleaning service, landscaping repair. I documented everything with photos and receipts for the insurance claim and the civil suit my lawyer said I should file. Frank showed up at my house a week later, looking rough. Apparently posting bail for Linda and Kayla had wiped out a chunk of their savings. You need to drop the charges, he said without preamble. This has gone too far. I didn't vandalize anyone's property, I replied from my doorway, not inviting him in. They did. They're facing the consequences of their actions. Kayla's pregnant. You're really going to let her go to jail? She should have thought about that before throwing rocks through my windows. He tried every angle. Family loyalty, thinking about the baby, considering Linda's mental health, his own financial situation. None of it mattered. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't backing down. You're making a mistake, he said finally. Family is supposed to stick together. Funny how that only applies when you need something from me, I replied. Where was that family loyalty when I was 8 years old and Linda called me someone else's spoiled kid? Where was it every holiday when Kayla got everything and I got forgotten? Where was it when I bought this house and you couldn't even say congratulations? He didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there looking defeated before finally leaving. The court case moved forward. Linda and Kayla both pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for probation, community service, and restitution for the damages. The judge wasn't sympathetic to the pregnancy card Kayla tried to play, pointing out that being pregnant doesn't give you permission to commit crimes. I thought that would be the end of it. Thought they'd finally leave me alone after facing actual legal consequences. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the court case wrapped up, I was home late one evening when I heard shouting outside. Looked out the window to see some guy pacing on my lawn, yelling at my house like a madman. Opened the door cautiously, keeping it mostly closed. Can I help you? You're the guy, right? He barked, pointing at me. The one screwing with Kayla? My stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb. She told me everything. How you're sabotaging her, making her life miserable, forcing her out on the streets while she's pregnant. You think that's okay? This was insane. Kayla had apparently spun some story to one of her clients and sent him to my house to intimidate me. I think you should leave, I said firmly. Whatever Kayla told you isn't true, and you're trespassing. I'm not going anywhere until you fix this, he shouted, taking a step toward the porch. I slammed the door and locked it, immediately calling the cops. My heart was racing as this stranger pounded on my door, threatening to make me pay for what I'd done to Kayla. The police arrived within minutes. The guy tried explaining his side to the officers, how he was just trying to help a pregnant woman being victimized by her evil stepbrother. The cops weren't impressed, especially when they ran his name and found outstanding warrants. He got arrested right there in my front yard. That night, standing in my house listening to the sirens fade, I made a decision. This place, my dream house, the thing I'd worked so hard for, didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a target. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I was looking over my shoulder. Every noise outside made me tense. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, and they'd turned it into a source of constant stress. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.